Welcome back to Dating on High Alert. Today we're not talking about dating anybody else, we're talking about dating yourself, because so many of us are being diagnosed later in life, whether it's ADHD or autism or something else, and suddenly we're meeting ourselves properly for the first time. And when you meet yourself, you might realise something that you feel really deeply too. I mean, I know I do, and it's not occasionally, or it's certainly not politely, but it's deeply. And if somebody is hurting, I can feel it in my body. If the energy in a room shifts, I notice immediately. And if somebody is carrying something heavy, I can sense it before they even need to say a word. And sometimes I just don't like it, because it does feel very intense. And it doesn't just come in gentle waves. It arrives fully formed. And I've rebuilt my life after things that should have happened, but they didn't. And if anything, I feel more. And for a long time I wondered, why am I built like this? Why does it feel so much stronger in me than it seems to in other people? And why doesn't this feel normal? And I can see why people might think that we're too sensitive. And I really don't see it as fragility. I don't see it as being dramatic. And from what I've learned, it's certainly not a weakness. And I can put it down to it just being wiring. And today I want to explore what it really means to feel everything. The overwhelm, the strength, the cost, and the beauty of it, without any shame. And there's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I can trace this back. I'm not talking about diagnosis, and I'm not talking about a label, but to being really young. And I remember walking into rooms and just knowing. No one had said anything. There weren't any arguments happening. No one had raised their voice, but something in the air had changed. And my body reacted before my brain could even catch up. My stomach would tighten, my shoulders would tense, my chest would feel heavy, and I would just go quiet, being watchful, scanning. And it's strange when I think about it now, because as a child, you don't sit there analysing nervous systems. In fact, you probably haven't got a clue what's going on. You just assume that the feeling is you. So when I cry easily, or when I reacted quickly or seemed overly emotional, I thought that meant that I was weak, that I was fragile, but I thought it meant that I just couldn't cope. But what I see now, with distance between it, is something really, really different. That little girl wasn't being dramatic, or she wasn't being overly sensitive. She was perceptive. She wasn't weak. She was reading micro shifts in tone, posture, silence. She was scanning for safety. And when you grow up needing to scan for safety, your system gets really, really good at it, almost too good. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because I just feel that we don't talk about this enough. And when your nervous system learns to read the room early, it doesn't just switch off when life becomes calmer. It stays alert, and it stays tuned in, and it stays open. And that openness is what later gets called too sensitive. But maybe it's not sensitivity in the way that people mean it. Maybe it's attunement. Maybe it's a body that learnt to feel in order to survive. And maybe that very same wiring that once protected me is the same wiring that now allows me to sit with somebody in pain and not look away. And also now, as a grown woman, I can see how that wiring never left me. I can still walk into a room and feel shifts immediately. I still sense when somebody is holding back the tears. And I still notice tone changes most people miss. And if somebody I care about is in pain, my body responds. I wouldn't say it was intellectually, but I respond physically. Again, my shoulders go up, my chest tightens, my eyes fill, my stomach drops, and sometimes it's really inconvenient, and sometimes I just wish I could just let things roll past me. And sometimes I wish I didn't feel the full emotional temperature of a space. But it's because, it's intense. And it's not just mild empathy, it's fully immersive. And when you're the one reacting first or feeling visibly, it can really make you question yourself, and you can start wondering, am I overreacting? Am I too much? Why does this hit me so hard when everybody else seems to be fine with it? And here's where we need to untangle this part, because I feel as if it's really important. Intensity does not mean instability. Feeling deeply doesn't mean that you're fragile or too sensitive. It doesn't mean that you can't cope. And I don't think that it means that you're dramatic. In fact, in my experience, it's often quite the opposite. Some of the strongest people I know are the ones who feel everything and keep going anyway. Strength isn't numbness. Strength isn't emotional flawness, or flatness for that matter. Strength is being able to experience the full moment of something and still stay present. And maybe that looks like it's too sensitive from the outside. It's actually a nervous system that is highly responsive, highly perceptive, and highly active. And yes, that can be overwhelming, but it's definitely not a weakness. Because somewhere along the way, we absorbed this idea that calm equals strong. That if you're steady-faced and measured and composed, that means that you are regulated. And if you cry easily or feel visibly or react quickly, that must mean that you are unstable. But I don't believe that to be true. Intensity is about how deeply something is experienced. Instability is about whether you can recover. Those two are not the same thing. And you can feel something intensely and still think clearly. And you can cry and still be strong. You can react and still take responsibility. In fact, one of the reasons I know that I'm not unstable is this: I recover. I don't stay stuck in the chaos. I don't ever lose my sense of reality, and I certainly don't stop functioning. But do I feel deeply? Yes, I do. But I know how to process, and that's very different. And for some of us, emotion moves through quickly because we allow it to. It rises fast, it peaks fast, and it releases. And other people might not show it, but that doesn't mean that they're not feeling it. And it might mean they are holding it. And I've started to wonder, is part of my strength coming from the fact that I can let it move, that I don't harden, that I don't suppress until it, calcifies? Because when you're suppressing these feelings long enough, that's when things can become unstable, not when you're actually feeling it at the moment. And maybe what the world labels as being too sensitive is actually emotional mobility, a system that can respond, a system that can actually process, a system that refuses to go numb. And in a world where numbness is, I think it's quite normalized, that can look dramatic, but it might actually be healthy. This wiring, this depth, it's not just something to manage, it's something beautiful. Because the reason I feel so much is the same reason I would never intentionally hurt somebody. It's the reason I think carefully before I speak. Okay, admittedly, I speak sometimes before I think, but when it comes to feelings. It's the reason I notice when somebody is left out in a room. It's the reason I can sit with somebody else's grief and not rush them to be positive or to get over it. Sensitivity has made me ethical. It's made me become more thoughtful. And I also think that it's made me aware of impact. And in a world where people can be careless, dismissive, emotionally disconnected, I think that really matters. But beauty doesn't cancel overwhelm. There are days when it's exhausting. There are days when I don't want to absorb the world or the room. And there are days when I wish the dial could be turned down. And this is where capacity comes in, because the goal isn't to become less sensitive. The goal is to become stronger around our sensitivity, to build nervous system capacity so that when intensity rises, it doesn't sweep you away. And capacity isn't suppression. It's being able to say, I feel this really deeply, but I am safe. It's being able to pause instead of spiral. And it's knowing the difference between what is mine and what I'm picking up from somebody else. And sometimes I'll literally stop and ask myself, is this my pain, or am I carrying somebody else's emotional weather? And that one question has changed a lot for me, because empathy without boundaries is depletion. But empathy with awareness, well, I think it's quite a leadership. I think it's a strength. And I think it's emotional intelligence in motion. So if you're somebody who feels deeply, and if it's intense and if it doesn't feel normal, I don't want you to, rush to that feeling of shame or embarrassment. I want you to get curious. Your system has obviously learned something early, and your body became very, very good at feeling. But the work isn't to undo that, it's to support it. Let me tell you what this looked like for me recently. My aunt had cancer, and as things progressed, the hospice, the hospital updates, something happening inside me that felt almost unbearable. I mean, of course I was sad. Of course I was going to miss her deeply. But what overwhelmed me wasn't just my upcoming grief and my grief after she passed. It was feeling everybody else's. I could feel my cousin's pain. I could feel what my uncle must be experiencing, losing his wife. I could feel my dad and his siblings facing the reality of losing their sister. And every update felt significant and heavy. And every time we spoke about it, I was often the first one to break down, and sometimes not just tearful, but sobbing. And I could sense something else too. People started walking on eggshells around me. Some people were uncomfortable with how deeply I was feeling it. But here's the thing. I don't consider it being my past. I wasn't trauma triggered. I wasn't dealing with unresolved grief. It was imagination meeting empathy. It was my body stepping into what they must be feeling. And at the funeral, I was expected to cry. And that's what funerals are. But when I saw the immediate family crying, when my dad's voice broke down during his speech, it hit me like a wave. And it's not like I can't cope. It wasn't about that, but it was because I could feel the magnitude of it. I mean, even now, after the funeral, after everybody has gone back to their routines, I still feel this ache when I think about my uncle sitting in the house without her, and the habits that will take time to undo. The automatic moments where you turn to say something and remember you can't. Even talking about it now wells me up. And this is the part that I want to explore, because from the outside, that might look like she's too sensitive. She's taken it harder than everyone. She can't handle it. But inside, well, I'm not falling apart. I wasn't falling apart. I was just absorbing. And there's a big difference there. There's something else that happened during that time. I could feel people becoming uncomfortable, and it wasn't because I was collapsing, but because I was visibly emotional. I genuinely think some people assumed that I couldn't cope. Maybe they thought that I was fragile, the sensitivity thing, that I needed protecting. And at one point, I was even asked if I could sit somewhere else to make it more comfortable for them. And that's the moment that really stayed with me, because I certainly wasn't falling apart. I felt as if I was releasing, and I feel that is different too. It wasn't me spiraling. I wasn't losing control. I wasn't unable to function. I mean, yeah, okay, I was crying, yes, sometimes sobbing, but I was also present. I was grounded. I was aware. I could regulate it. Obviously, I'm crying when I'm crying. But I don't think people understand is if I don't let it move, it gets heavier. If I suppress it to make everybody else more comfortable, it doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It sits in my chest. It builds pressure. It turns into something far more destabilizing than tears. So when I cry, it's not because I can't cope. It's because I can. It's because my system knows how to process emotion in real time. And maybe that's the part that's misunderstood. We've been taught that strength looks quiet, composed, dry-eyed. But for some of us, strength looks like feeling it fully, letting it move, and remain standing. Just because I feel intensely doesn't mean that I'm unstable. It means I'm metabolizing emotion instead of storing it. And since when did processing emotion become a flaw? I see it as having capacity. And there's another side to this that I don't want to miss, because this sensitivity, this intensity, it isn't just something I manage in private. It's something that I use. I use it in my work, online, with survivors, on corporate panels. I don't just argue policy. I don't just present the facts. I speak about the emotional cost of silence, the weight of shame, the damage of power imbalance. And the reason I can articulate that is because I feel it. And when I talk about survivors not being believed, I don't say it clinically. I can feel the humiliation in my body. And when I talk about systems failing people, I don't just analyze it. I understand what it does to somebody else's nervous system. And that changes the room. My sensitivity allows me to silence a space, not with volume, but with depth. And people listen because they can feel that I'm not theorizing. I'm translating something emotional into language. And again, I don't see that as a weakness anymore. I see it as leadership. And I've also noticed this. When something painful happens, most people move on quickly, but I don't. I'm the one who checks in a week later. I'm the one who senses that somebody is still carrying something long after the moment has passed. And maybe you do too. And then I reach out. And again, it's not because I'm being dramatic, but because I know how long emotion can linger. And of course, there's another layer, because alongside this depth, I'm autistic. And sometimes I feel everything intensely, but I can't express it in that moment. Sometimes the words just don't come. Sometimes I go quiet, and sometimes I process it later. But just because I can't articulate instantly doesn't mean it isn't happening inside of me. It's still immense. It's still moving. And I think that's really important to say, because sensitivity doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it can look like silence. Sometimes it can look like delayed processing. And sometimes it looks like needing a bit of time. But it's still a depth. And even though that depth isn't always poetic, sometimes it's blimmin' unbearable. And when the intensity hits, especially with grief, or when I know somebody is experiencing something horrific, it can feel like it engulfs me. And it doesn't necessarily come in gently. It moves fast. It feels like it grabs my chest and my throat at the same time, like somebody is strangling me with emotion. And at first, it can feel impossible to escape. So yeah, sometimes I cry. Sometimes it follows me around all day, and it won't shut up. It's so loud in my body. And that's when I have to be really conscious, because I know my limits. When I hear, survivor stories like that mirror what I've lived through, it can cripple me if I'm not prepared. I can't just casually consume other people's trauma. I can't watch certain documentaries. I can't absorb certain content without it staying with me. And it's incredibly uncomfortable. And I think this is where people misunderstand sensitivity again. And having this boundary isn't a weakness. Preparation doesn't mean that I'm fragile. When I know that I'm about to sit with something really heavy, whether that's in my work or supporting somebody, I have to prepare myself. I give myself the space before and afterwards. And I don't stack it on top of an already full nervous system, because feeling deeply requires management. And that doesn't make it less beautiful. It makes it sustainable. I never want anybody to feel what I felt. And when I know somebody is experiencing something devastating, it truly hurts me deeply. And yeah, something else. If somebody came to me and needed me to listen, of course I would always be there. Always. And that's the paradox. I can't casually consume pain, but I can consciously hold it. And that's also a difference. One overwhelms me, the other one is chosen. And that's where the strength lives. Not in never feeling it, but in deciding when and how I need to engage with it. So if you're listening to this and you're like me and you feel everything, if your chest tightens, if documentaries set you off, if grief feels like it swallows you whole, if people think that you can't cope because you cry, I want you to really hear this. You are not unstable. You are not too much. And you're certainly not weak. But you are wired for depth, and that depth, it needs support and it needs boundaries. And it needs preparation. It needs the recovery time. And again, this is not a flaw. It might actually be the reason you are thoughtful, ethical, and so careful with people. And the reason you would never intentionally harm somebody the reason that you can sit in rooms that others rush out of. And you don't need to harden, you don't need to become bitter. You just need to understand your capacity. And maybe, just maybe, when we stop shaming sensitivity, we start recognizing it as one of the most powerful forms of strength that there is. So if this episode meant something to you, if you're recognizing yourself in this depth, this intensity, this wiring, I want you to know that, you're definitely not alone in this. So many of us are learning ourselves later in life, unpicking the shame, the rewriting narratives, and understanding that we thought that what we thought was too much was actually attunement. And if you're navigating late diagnosis and trauma alongside it, or simply trying to build capacity around your sensitivity, this is the work that I care about deeply. And you'll find links in the show notes if you want to explore mentoring, resources, or just to simply stay connected. And if this helped you feel seen, share it with somebody who has been told that they're too sensitive, because maybe they're not too much. Maybe they're just deeply wired. Take care of your depth. You need to protect it, support it, don't let it harden. And as usual, until next spiral.